Welcome to Growing Home, the podcast that helps you take care of the place that means the most to you, your home. I'm your host, Terry Therian, alongside your co-host, Len Giddix. What a conversation today. We got a behind-the-curtain look into the Farmers Almanac, talking to Peter Geiger, its longtime and second-generation editor. What did you think, Len?
I'll tell you what, Terry, I've always enjoyed the Farmers Almanac. I mean, the way it gives you a lot of information that you would probably never hear of from another source, but it does it in such a laid-back, friendly way.
Right. It's like it's kind of like our social textbook, you know.
Yeah, it's a social guide to life, what it amounts to. And it has a different way of looking at our lives. Today's lifestyle is pretty hectic. It's full of microwaves and computers and deadlines, and the almanac looks at it from a different perspective, a perspective that we've probably long lost, or most of us have long lost. That 200 years ago was fact, and it still works. It's just that we don't have the time to observe it.
Yeah. And you know what? It's and even our social textbook as to how we interact with one another,
right.
Observations of society, but also observations of nature,
yeah.
and a guide to how we should interact with it. Like, what's the best day to go fishing?
I couldn't have put it better. But you know what? The most important thing that it asks and answers is, will there be a white Christmas this year?
I guess we'll have to read the Farmers Almanac to find out.
I guess so.
So with that, enjoy our chat with Peter Geiger. All right, Peter, thank you for joining us today, Len and myself, and sharing with us a bit about the 2018-2019 Farmers Almanac, and calling us in all the way from Lewiston, Maine.
Yes, my pleasure. It's always a pleasure to chat with you guys.
Yeah, so to get started, can you kind of give us a synopsis or overview of how you think about what exactly the Farmers Almanac is?
Think of it as a guide to good living. I think it's about helping people do things. I think it empowers people to try things that they might not otherwise have tried. But back in the 1800s, in 1818, David Young was our first almanac editor, and he published an almanac, as did almost everybody who had a printing press printed an almanac. And he had 5 different almanacs, and the Farmers Almanac was obviously intended for farmers. And so over the years, the 202 editions that we put forth of the publication, the almanac has just evolved with the times and the needs of the times. I think what we specifically don't do is we've never been political. I think it's interesting, when I was reading all of the almanacs from the beginning of time, there was nothing about the Civil War, there was nothing about World War I or II, or anything political at all. And I always thought that was really good. It was really about what people needed to do. So in the earliest days, the almanac was a kind of a guide to how to do things. So how to kiss, how to behave, what you should do, what a good young man does, a good woman does, what kind of careers we should have. And the almanac is really about information that you might not find somewhere else. And so that's what it's about. As it turns out, my father met the previous editor in 1933 or 34, and my father was 21 years old, and the editor was 89 years old. So within a year or two, all of a sudden, my father's the editor of the Farmers Almanac, and he did it for 60 consecutive years, even when he was in the South Pacific during World War II. So the almanac has a long tradition. We've always been published, and one aspect of what we do is weather, but that's not the only thing we do. In fact, I like to think that the weather is only 16 pages out of 200 pages, and so as I said at the very beginning, it's a guide to good living. It's a place to go to find information that maybe your parents told you about or your grandparents told you about. And so that's what the almanac is. It's a guide to good living.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you talked a little bit about your father and the history of the almanac. How did that transition go, and what was your path to becoming the editor of the Farmers Almanac?
Well, my father was very forward-thinking. We have a company called Geiger Brothers, and we deal with imprinted merchandise, pens, pencils, logos, anything that has a logo on it. And that's what the almanac was from 1818 to 1994. Only a business could buy it and put their name on it and give it away. 1995, Sandy Duncan, my managing editor, and I started a retail edition. But when I was 7 years old, so my father was always thinking about his boys coming into the business. So when I'm 7 years old, my father's saying to me, I think you should be the editor of the Farmers Almanac. And I'm thinking about it. And the kicker was that no editor died before the age of 86. So I thought about it, and I said, okay, that sounds good to me. And so here I am. This is my 40th year with my name on the cover, 25th year with Sandy Duncan doing a retail edition. And so my entree was my father when I'm 7 years old telling me I should be doing it. But then when I first started with the company in 1973, so this is my 45th anniversary with the company, I started to go on trips with my father, watching what he did, how he promoted the almanac. And then I was doing the mail. People were sending letters in and saying, I love the almanac, and this means a great deal to me. Before I die, I want you to know this is important. And it gave me a sense that the almanac really is an important publication to many people. It isn't an unsophisticated publication. It is not necessarily for farmers. It really is for urban farmers as well as people who have gardens. And it always resonated with me that people love the almanac for a variety of reasons, and that's why I think I love it. And this is why this is now my 40th year doing it.
Yeah, there's not one subject. Gardeners, farmers, even just nature lovers can learn so much from it. Using new cleaning products and stuff like that, homemade cleaning products. Peter, in your title is the word philom. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, it's philom, Philom, period, philom. It's an abbreviation for the word philomath or philomathian, and it means that you're a lover of learning. And so people who came to this country and set up printing presses long before there were newspapers or magazines were publishing almanacs. And some almanacs were medicinal because there weren't a lot of doctors, so it gave out medicinal advice. Some were religious because there weren't many ministers. I mean, going way, way back in the 1700s, 16, 17, early 1800s. And then in the middle 1800s, a lot of almanacs were called farmers because everybody was a farmer, and every almanac stayed in this little community, and it wasn't like there was a lot of crossover. So that's basically how the almanac got started, and that's we've kept the name, and I've kept the name not because farmers read the almanac, but I think we associate farming, we associate gardening with the earth, with growing something, with doing something good. And today, if you fast forward and I look at all the different changes, even in my 40 years, the changes that have taken place, today people want to have food that's healthy. They want to grow it themselves. They don't want things that are tainted. You always hear about bad foods that are coming in. And so how do I do that? How do I do canning? How do I do gardening? How do I do these things? And the almanac, both the almanac, the book, and the almanac, the website, farmersalmanac.com, allows people to get information to help them do whatever it is they want to do.
Yeah, there are a lot of lost arts that you cover.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And the most popular page on my website is not even weather. It's actually fun fishing and hunting pages, and it's actually hunting and fishing, and it's usually males 24 years old to 34 years old. And
we tried that out with the fishing end of it. And went out specifically on a day that said it was going to be good fishing last month. Mm-hmm. And son of a gun, it was right. Maybe it was a coincidence. I'm going to try it again. But I was always a little bit leery about that. But it seems to work.
Well, it does work. I mean, because I literally have millions of people who come and try it and use it and continually use it. I will say that from my own personal experience, this summer was not a good fishing summer. At my cottage last summer ago, it was great. This summer, it was hard to find anything.
Yeah, well, I just have news for you, Peter. There's no good day to castrate a calf, at least according to the calves.
I was going to say, not according to the animals. Well, we have calendars in the almanac that are about when to do things, and for the most part, it was digging poles, castrating animals, things of that nature. And then about 10 years ago, somebody said to me, "Isn't there something more modern than that?" And so we looked into it, and basically, when you use the signs of the moon and the zodiac, you're able to calculate when the best time is to get married, to get your hair cut, to buy a house, throw a party. And I think a lot of it has to do with the mood, the impact the moon has on our moods and our personalities. I actually have had several people who have had cancer who told me that cutting according to the signs that your hair grows back stronger or thicker actually works. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it has something to do with, I think, the moon and the blood. That's why there's certain days for surgery are good, certain days for castrating are good, because it has to do with the flow of blood in the body and how the moon affects it and all. And I mean, I'm not, I know that we have a formula that does it, and for many people, that's a big deal.
Your weather predictions are years in advance. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do the weather, or we can do the weather 2 years in advance. I mean, clearly we're published a year in advance, but back in 1818, when David Young was the first editor, and he knew that weather was important for farmers. So he was a mathematician, a calculator, an astronomer, and so he put together a mathematical formula that's based on the sunspot activity, planet position, effect the moon has on the Earth, and some other components. But that's how he was able to do weather 2 years in advance. Now he was in New Jersey at the time, and I'm sure that's what he was predicting weather for. Over the course of the almanac, obviously the country expanded, the almanac expanded, and then in 1995, Sandy and I decided to break the country into zones, U.S. and Canada, and so we do it 2 years out. We're doing it by zones of the country, and we also do it by 3-day segments. I think one of my best predictions in the history of my life was when the Super Bowl was being held in New Jersey in an outdoor stadium. And it was very controversial, apparently. I didn't know it was controversial, but it was. Because outdoors and snow could be a problem. So the August before the Super Bowl, I'm saying there's going to be a big snowstorm between February 1st and the 3rd. And the game was on the 2nd. So long and the short of it is, it started to snow. As the game was ending, that started to snow, and people couldn't get out of New Jersey. It didn't stop the game, but it was very interesting because everybody was interested in what's going to happen. And sure enough, the very storm that I called for 2 years in advance happened just as we said it would happen. I don't hit everything all the time, but I hit other things. And that was just what was so interesting about that is it was, the news, people are interested in the news, but this was the sports. And so all fall long, I'm watching national football games and they're saying, Farmers Almanac says it's going to snow during the Super Bowl. And my great fear was it was going to be 70 degrees and sunny, and I'd have to explain it for the rest of my life. But it was perfect. It was dead on in terms of what we said it was going to be.
Say, does NOAA or the National Weather Service ever consult the almanac?
Well, I won't say publicly they don't, but I think that they probably do. Maybe they should. I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that NOAA is now coming out with like long range. They used to say nobody can do this. Now they're coming out with at least a sense for what the winter is going to be, or they even come out with what next fall is going to be. And they'll tell you that we can't do what we're doing, but then they're trying to do it. And more power to them.
Yeah.
So actually, back to where you were talking about everybody's into gardening organically. And we were back to talking about the timing of everything, where it's, the day to sow seeds, the day to harvest, the day to castrate your animals. But, the big thing that we're finding, especially with our customers about growing things naturally and organically, are using, just natural elements in their favor. And the big thing is timing. So I could see, a big thing with, not as much the weather forecast and whether or not we'll be digging ourselves out or snowing during the Super Bowl, but when is the window of opportunity, the last frost date, and, setting people up for success that way, and just, being aware of the natural elements, for success instead of, using things like fertilizer.
Well, exactly. And, sometimes people poo-poo it, but long before there was radio and whatever, even the almanacs, people used to observe what was going on, and that helped them know what kind of a winter it was going to be. So we have this thing called 20 Signs of a Hard Winter, and it's unusual activity of squirrels, acorns, the thickness of the husk on corn. And there's 20 of these things that are on my website. The interesting thing this year has been squirrels, and I'm sure it's true where you are. Squirrel activity has been nuts. I mean, 5% of these suckers going across the street at the same time, and they're just frantic. I mean, I don't know what it means, and I don't know if it means